In my book, Such a Mind Is This, a biblical theological study of thinking in the Old Testament, I often use the word worldview. In this video, I want to provide a brief orientation of the concept. But keep in mind that this is not a detailed exposition and that I will bring my biblical theological assumptions to bear on the concept. So let's begin with a definition. The word worldview comes from the German term Weltanschauung, meaning perception of the world or the sense perception of the world, and it was coined by the philosopher Immanuel Kant in 1790. But over the following century, in philosophy, the term evolved into an intellectual conception of the world, a perception of reality from the perspective of the human knower, as a philosophical exercise apart from revelation. So there are two aspects. There's a descriptive aspect that something exists. In other words, why is there anything at all? And why not nothing? Assuming an answer to that question, then there is a second, prescriptive aspect generating obligation. Well, then how should we live? How should we conduct ourselves? So a worldview is a life philosophy, an intellectual grid or interpretive framework, ultimate priorities and unquestioned beliefs, as well as a guide for living in both personal ethics and social relationships. James Sire wrote, "A worldview is a commitment, a fundamental orientation of the heart that can be expressed as a story or in a set of presuppositions, assumptions that may be true, partially true, or entirely false, which we hold consciously or subconsciously, consistently or inconsistently about the basic makeup of our world." James Sire. In other words, worldviews order reality. They tell us what is good and evil, how to use our time, who, what, and how to love, what we should believe, our identity, how we should spend money, those in and out groups to avoid or join, and of course provides purpose in life. Worldviews answer questions. For example, what is reality and what exists? What is a human being? How can I know reality? How do I know truth? Does truth exist? How should I live? What is good and what is evil? How can people live in peace and flourish? Why is there evil and suffering? Is there a solution? Is redemption experienced only in this life or the next, or in both? We can also think of worldview with a chronological or temporal dimension, reflecting upon the past, the present, and the future. So for example, beginnings. Where do we come from? And how do we get here? Present. Where are we now? And what am I doing here? In future. What is our purpose and where are we going? We can think of it as well in the simple way with the question, who takes care of us? Or what is there about this environment, this world, that enables human life to exist? What sustains us? Well, if you have little children, perhaps you've seen the latest reincarnation of the Cinderella movie, and there is a very interesting dialogue between Cinderella and her mother. Her mother says, "Oh yes, I believe that animals listen and speak to us if we only have the ear for it. That's how we learn how to look after them." And Cinderella asks, "Who looks after us?" "Fairy godmothers, of course." "And do you believe in them?" "I believe in everything." "Then I believe in everything too." We can think of worldviews as software. A worldview is that we have on our computer. We rarely think about it, and we never see it unless we deliberately look for it, but we use it all the time and depend upon it completely. It's the unseen software in our computers, which is the precondition for use in the hardware of our laptops or computers, whatever we may have. Now, if worldview is akin to the hidden software, which guides our thinking and prescription of reality and our behavior, Then the computer hardware is the worldview thinker himself, who tries to put together the puzzle pieces of existence with or without accurate information, with or without truth. So worldviews function like religions. They orient humans existentially and provide clarity. They are descriptive and provide guidance. They declare what is true and what is heresy. They provide heroes to worship and causes to die for. Worldviews are founded upon a, quote, fundamental faith commitment, and so worldviews are fundamentally religious. That is, they are types of faith. They deal with life at the level of deepest commitment. Ted Turnell. There are three kinds of religions and worldviews. There are explicit, such as the ones we know, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism. Then there are secular religions, often found in the form of political ideology and totalitarianism, such as Nazism, communism, and North Korean Hookeism. But there are also implicit religions, which functions phenomenologically, psychologically, as religions and provide meaning and purpose to life, such as consumerism, sports fanaticism, nationalisms, and all kinds of in-group ideologies. We can say that worldviews come in three sizes. Macro, theoretical systems that we just discussed, religions and philosophies, naturalism, existentialism, modernity, and postmodernity. Micro, or what have been called lived worldviews, paradigms that guide us in every way, individualism, moral relativism, scientific naturalism, New Age spirituality, postmodern tribalism, nationalism, Hollywood worldviews, salvation by therapy in the psychological profession, and the myth of progress, which basically says that science and technology will save mankind. And then finally, many individual stories that we embrace that define our personal identity, usually according to a number of different discourses or motifs: rags to riches, just do it, and be all you can be, to name a few common ones. So in practice, worldviews are a mix of personal preference, experience, education, cultural formation, and spiritual orientation. So how do we acquire worldviews? First, through formal education. We learn systems or theoretical worldviews, isms such as those that I name, usually in a university setting. And then informal education. This statement by Steve Wilkins and Mark Sanford is quite illuminating. The most powerful influences that come from worldviews that emerge from culture, they are all around us, but are so deeply embedded in culture that we don't see them. We call them lived worldviews, because we are more likely to absorb them through cultural contact than adopt them through a rational evaluation of competing theories. And what about worldview change? Well, it doesn't happen easily. Worldviews entail intellectual, emotional, ethical, economic, social, and religious commitments at the deepest level of our being. Worldviews are the paste that holds our worlds together. They make sense of things, and they're not easily or quickly abandoned. One author wrote, "Whenever there is a gap between vision and reality, there is a crisis, frustration, and tension. If there is a change in worldview, our body awareness, feelings, and actions will tend to change accordingly. Fear of losing one's moorings are so strong that many people and groups retrench and deny reality." In other words, deny worldview change. If you're young enough to remember the first Matrix movie, Neo was totally incorporated, absorbed in a false narrative, a false world created by machines, computers, IT. He sensed something was wrong and sought for understanding and release, but he didn't really know what was happening until someone from the outside spoke to him, and that was Trinity. Or perhaps you remember the movie The Truman Show. Truman was also totally absorbed and encapsulated, defined within an artificial reality designed to sell things, consumerism. He too, though, set out on a search for reality and truth, and eventually found it through much travail. So, they worldviews are generally unquestioned by each of us, rarely, if ever, mentioned by our friends, and only brought to mind when we are challenged by a foreigner from another ideological universe. James Sire. Ted Turner wrote, "The influence of a worldview is therefore subterranean, and usually it surfaces only in the moments of stress, personal tragedy, or midlife crisis, or overwhelming joy, falling in love, the birth of a child, weddings, or when confronted with a radically different worldview, which happens more frequently in our increasingly pluralistic societies." Let me share with you an example from a student that I had when I was teaching in Prague. She wrote, "Karl Marx was almost my godfather. He did not let me read all these dangerous Western books. I could watch on TV only nice children's stories, not like today, when children watch the American rubbish, killing, fighting, making sex. We did not have to be scared of AIDS and drugs. We knew who was the idol and what was the ideal. We felt happy. Where should I look for an ideal today? Definitely not in the West, neither in the East. Maybe I'll look for it among the stars." So worldviews tell us descriptive reality, what to believe, consciously or assumed unconsciously about reality, what is, and imply obligatory or obligative requirements. That is, how should we behave in response? So now let me provide a brief biblical theological evaluation of worldview. Perhaps you've heard of the indicative imperative dynamic. It occurs in literature and religion and philosophy of the world, and basically consists of these parts: an indicative assertion, what is, followed by the word literally, therefore, or implied, logically, then an imperative demand or application, such as what we should do about it. In the Old Testament, in fact, in the Bible as a whole, the most important indicative imperative dynamic is the Shema from Deuteronomy 6, 4-5. The indicative states, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, among all the other competitors of the ancient Near East," or in the New Testament times. And the imperative, "Therefore, you shall love the Lord your God with your whole heart, with your whole being, and with your whole strength." An example from the New Testament would be something like this: "We love because he first loved us." Or from the Old Testament, "You shall be holy, for I am holy." So, all other worldviews substitute either or both the indicative statement of reality and the imperative response. These are idolatries. Again, the concept of worldview coincided with the rise of modernity and secularity. They provide alternative stories or alternative gospels to Christianity and religion. They provide a repudiation of the biblical worldview and offered as alternative perceptions of what is and what should be. They are developed from below or under the sun, as Ecclesiastes says, from human beings and not from the deity of the Bible or his revelation. Other worldviews repudiate Deuteronomy 6, 4-5, and substitute other descriptions of reality and the proper responses. So, although the word worldview does not occur in the Bible, the concept does, as idolatry.